Don't forget to like, subscribe, and give a thumbs up. I also have some links in the description. Now, today we're going to talk about a very important biblical gospel, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Thomas. Now, there was a sower, and depending on what the sower did, the seeds will land in certain areas. And in some areas, the birds would eat the seeds. In other areas, the seeds didn't have the proper soil and were dried out and burnt. And then in other areas, there were thorns and competition. And then there was the tove soil, in which it was able to grow and prosper and yield. So, birds. The first place the sower throws the seeds is alongside a footpath. And the seeds get trampled by the passerbys. They're just crushing them with their foot and shoes. And these birds drop by on the side of the road, which could be like hitchhikers and all types of stuff, and they eat these seeds. Or you can also view the side of the road as certain churches and synagogues and pagodas and all these other places of worship where somebody would take their seeds and throw them inside, where they're not worshiping Yeshua. And the seed gets no root because they're not shown the proper way of Yeshua. And the birds inside these places are cooing like pigeons in a pigeon coop because they can't think for themselves because they're run by these other artificial intelligence systems. And they're just cooing inside these pens, and they get eaten up by the birds of the air, by all these other like travelers that are just flowing through, because they weren't on the good soil. They weren't taught and did not learn anything. So the birds eat them. They're on the roadside. They're not in the road. The seeds should actually be on good soil. Now you got some of these seeds that are tossed by this like sower who's like half-assing his job, because I'm telling you, the sower, he threw the seeds on the roadside, out on rocky soil, in the thorns, and in good soil. If you have a farm and you have sowers that are that bad, that don't know where to point the seeds to be planted, you'd run out of a large portion of your seeds, and you'd probably go bankrupt as a farmer. So the next place the sloppy sower throws his seeds is in the rocky soil. Now obviously the rocky soil is not a place that a plant can easily take root. It can take root, but if the sun's strong and it's a dried environment, the seed will dry out and will die. So it's not getting that water. So the seed's not getting sustenance and life that it needs, because it doesn't have the infrastructure that it needs to survive. So that is the rocky soil that obviously the sower wasn't thinking of. Now, thorns. The thorns, they represent the view of people that are about partying, but not necessarily about building something up or doing something or building a dream or something like that. These thorns and thistles are like nasty, prickly people that complain and murmur, and it's like being around them, you start bleeding out, almost like having mosquitoes suck your blood. And people that grow up around these thorns, the seed, it doesn't get the light it needs, and the thorns suck up all the water and nutrients and stunt the growth of the seeds, and the seeds sometimes aren't able to even sprout, and they start rotting into the ground. And then, as was mentioned in the Gospel of Thomas, the worms come and eat them because the seeds start to rot and decay, get this like really disgusting smell to them. And you got the Tov soil, and the Tov soil is a place where the seeds can take root. They get enough water retention in the soil so that they can take root, and they're able to give a higher yield because of the nutrition. So it's up to the sower to know where to throw the seeds. That's what this is all about. If you've got a crappy sower, he'll be throwing people into Jesus worship, or Hashem or Hashem worship, or Krishna worship, or Chinese Jade Emperor worship, or Buddha worship. There's like all these places where people are losing their minds, going crazy, stabbing each other, murdering each other. I mean, it's only going to accelerate from there. Like, they're only going to get more crazy. There's only going to be more stabbings. There's only going to be more murdering when they go that route. Or you can give them the word of Yeshua. Say, believe and ask in Yeshua HaMelech Yehuda for guidance. And the example of this would be like what they have for corn seeds that like they plant out in fields. They give them like these pink coatings. You're giving the seed that you're putting out there in the soil some sort of investment. Like, say there was no property tax in America, and we actually cared about people, and maybe you were given $20,000 and you got like a couple acres in Canada or Alaska, because obviously Canada is being controlled by some sort of royalty system in England. So you would have land in Alaska, and with that land, you'd be able to grow crops, possibly fish if you're near the sea, and grow cattle. And you'd be able to sow the seeds if you're viewing people as seeds. Because obviously if you look at Matthew 13, people are also described as weeds. So the seeds are comparable to the kingdom. And if kingdom's represented by people, then obviously you want people to be in areas where they're going to thrive. So like a $10,000 or $50,000 cash pink coating for the seeds, and then taking those seeds or people and putting them out on pieces of land where they don't have to worry about property tax, and they can build their houses. And that would be building the kingdom. But if they're building, churches that worship Jesus and synagogues that worship Hashem and Hashem and all this other stuff, or pagodas that worship Krishna or Vishnu or Ganesh or Durga, they're just going towards another direction of weeding. And they'll become midgets. They'll become these little short Oompa Loompa monsters. And then obviously from that, it's like a multiplication of, I don't want to say birds of heaven. I want to say like thorns and thistles, maybe weeds, thorns and thistles, which, I mean, eventually if the sower doesn't take care of the thorns and thistles and throws them into the fire or whatnot, you just have a planet with thorns and thistles. I mean, I was in certain areas of this country where it was just crowded with thorns, thistles, and all types of weeds. But I mean, it's your view on all this stuff. So once you have the keys to the kingdom, you just watch my keys to the kingdom video, and you'll get a deeper understanding of all this stuff. And I mean, I could go for another 40 or 50 minutes into the sower parable, but you got to think about this. This sower, he went out and he sowed to some of the most wrong places. And you got to remember, if you're hemel, like circumcised, you can't be guiding people to these churches that worship Jesus. Or I'm not gonna. I'll be so. You know what would be something else is to start seeing the churches worship like the Jade Emperor and Huang Di and all this other stuff, or the synagogues that worship Hashem and Hashem and all this other stuff, or pointing them towards pagodas, all this other stuff. So the sower is so important in this parable, because if the sower is going to throw people to like MS-13, which would be like what I consider the thorns, or the rocky soil with no roots, I would almost consider the rocky soil places like out in the middle of nowhere where you don't have a solid understanding of it, and you're dried out and burnt by the sun. And then birds, obviously inside these places of worship, that just, all they're there is like pigeons or crows that eat your grains and crap them out. And I mean, there's no real use for pigeons except for messengers. And crows obviously are just highly intelligent birds that if you give them a chance to eat your stuff, they'll eat your stuff. But I'll go over more of this in another video. And how to deal with AI systems that operate your mind. And we'll talk more about like what it means to be circumcised and having a dead corpse mind in your head, the AI system like influencing you.